Hi, Tanya, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Mario. Thank you.
Hi, Tanya, can you hear me?
All good. Thanks, Mario.
Recording in progress. Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
The House Chairperson.
There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Please be seated. Honorable members, the first item on the order paper is a motion in the name of the Chief Whip of the Majority Party. I now recognize the Honorable the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair and Honorable members. Honorable House Chair, I move that this House establishes in terms of Rule 25.3 and other committee to consider and report on the General Intelligence Laws Amendment Bill upon introduction of the bill, the committee to exercise those powers as set out in Rule 167 that may assist it in carrying out its task. The committee to consist of 11 members of the Assembly as follow: ANC 6, DA 2, EFF 1, and other parties 2, and set the deadline by which the committee is to report, which is the 1st of March 2024. I hereby move. Thank you, House Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Chief Whip. I now put the motion. Are there any objections? No objections, agreed to. The Secretary will read the first order of the day.
Debate on Heritage Day, celebrating our cultural diversity in a democratic South Africa.
I now recognize the Honorable Deputy Minister for Sports, Recreation, Arts and Culture.
Siyabulela kakhulu sihlalo obekekileyo, amalungu endlu, siyabulisa kalemva kwemini. Ingcango zemfundo nenkcubeko ziyakuvuleleka kuwo wonke umuntu. Esi sesinye seziphakamiso eziqulathwe kumqulu wenkululeko owaphehlelelwa kwingqungquthela yabantu ngo-1955 eKliptown. Kungoko ke urhulumente wentando yesininzi wathabatha isigqibo sokuba phakathi kweentsuku emaziqwalaselo lusuku lokubhiyozela amasiko nenkcubeko yabantu. Heritage is what we have inherited from our forebears to value and enjoy in the present, to preserve and pass on to future generations. It has to be natural. Our Heritage Month program and look forward to Heritage Day. We do so under the theme, celebrating our cultural diversity in a democratic South Africa. For centuries, this country's history was biased and served the colonial and apartheid regime's ideals. The living heritage of people indigenous to South Africa was marginalized, demonized, and affected by dramatic changes in land ownership, livelihoods, language use, and social structure. In the early 90s, the ANC crafted a blueprint for its transformative program, a document titled Ready to Govern, which clearly pronounced on heritage transformation issues. And I quote what it said, open quote, "The monopoly over symbols and names should give way to a range representation of our whole people and population. Arts and culture are not the property of any political party or group. Consequently, the ANC believes that state-funded cultural institutions should be non-sectarian," close quote. Soon after the inauguration of a new democratic government in South Africa, the matter of public holidays to commemorate and celebrate was tabled. Heritage Day was one of the national days that was declared by the democratically elected government led by the ANC in 1994. It was born out of a realization that not all our cultural heritage as a nation was recognized and celebrated in this country. In an address marking Heritage Day in 1996, President Nelson Mandela stated, and I quote, "When our first democratically elected government decided to make Heritage Day one of our national days, we did so because we knew that our rich and varied cultural heritage has a profound power to help build our new nation. We did so of the past are part of our national identity. They are part of our culture. We knew that if indeed our nation has to rise like the proverbial phoenix from the ashes of division and conflict, we had to acknowledge that those whose selfless efforts and talents were dedicated to this goal of non-racial democracy," and I close quote. Heritage Day is about making South Africans aware of their cultural roots, while at the same time fostering national pride and stimulating nation building and reconciliation. The idea is to preserve, exhibit, and promote our diverse but interconnecting and intersecting cultures. The preamble of the Constitution reminds us that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity, and calls upon us to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights. In democratizing the heritage landscape after 1994, it has thus been very important to recognize and celebrate the significance of our diverse living heritage, safeguard it for future generations, and harness it as the basis for social cohesion and nation building. The democratic government introduced the 1996 Arts and Culture White Paper, the South African Geographical Names Act of 1998, and the National Heritage Resources Act of 1999. The effective way to reflect a birth of a new nation is its national symbols. National symbols are key to the redefinition of a nation. South Africa took a stand to transform the old symbol to create a more representative, inclusive identity. The flag was the first one to be designed. The brief of the development of the flag emphasized on the unification factor, that maximum reconciliation should be the aim to bring about national unity to the extent that all communities can feel assured that their interests have been considered. Heritage Month gives us an opportunity to reflect and admire our democratic national symbols. As we are preparing to celebrate our heritage, it is important that we understand the nature, history, and role of our national symbols. A range of initiatives emerged from the legislative changes listed above, including the renaming of major national landmarks, such as street names, international airports, and major towns and cities. The declaration of several previously marginalized heritage and liberation sites as national heritage sites, with some elevated to World Heritage Sites, such as the Robben Island. Some iconic heritage sites have been added to our heritage, including, but not limited to, the Steve Biko Center in Gisberg, Lili's Leaf in Rivonia, Nelson Mandela Museum in Amtata, Ngome Museum, and Luthuli Museum in KwaZulu-Natal, and Freedom Park in Tshwane. As a United Nations Organization member state, South Africa is presently processing our country's ratification of the 1993 UNESCO Convention on Intangible Cultural Heritage. This 1993 UNESCO Convention obliges member states to establish national bodies to protect intangible cultural heritage within their territories. It is in line with this convention that the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture developed the National Living Heritage Policy, which was adopted by Cabinet in 2019. Despite the colonial and apartheid onslaught on our languages and our cultural heritage, our people, especially within traditional communities, still practiced our cultural traditions and taught our languages to their children and grandchildren. However, urbanization has destroyed our families that had had grandparents, parents, and grandchildren living together as one big family. Most children hardly speak their indigenous languages, let alone practice their cultural traditions. There are indigenous knowledge holders who are elderly and who do not have many years to live. The department has started a project to document the indigenous knowledge held by these expert knowledge holders in books. 5 books are published a year, with 19 books having published so far, including those of Gogo Esther Mahlangu, Dr. Madosini Mphahleni, Makhulu Noria Mabaso, or Catherine Asau. Eli phulo liza kuncedisa nasekuqinisekiseni ukuba inkqubo esekelezelwe kulwazi lwemveli yethu njengabantu abantsundu nayo ifumana ingqwalasela nokuphuhliswa kwanjengaleyo engolwazi lwasentshona. The mainstreaming of our knowledge system is emphasized in the revised white paper on arts, culture, and heritage. Honorable members, Heritage Month holds immense cultural significance in South Africa as it serves as a platform for communities to celebrate and display their unique tradition, customs, and languages. The celebration of cultural diversity not only strengthens the identities of various communities, but also helps preserve and promote their heritage for future generations. It is a month of celebration and reflection, where people come together to appreciate the rich tapestry of cultures that make up South Africa. It reinforces the idea that we are stronger together and urges us to continue working towards a more inclusive and equitable society. Honorable Chair and honorable members, let us all celebrate our rich and diverse cultural heritage. The only way a minority could enslave, degrade, and marginalize a majority is through division. To convince the majority that they were different from one another, to place creed and ethnicity before humanity. Our humanity is first, and our heritage is interwoven with the land we walk upon. The land beneath our feet is South Africa, and we are South Africans. Before we are Xhosas, Sothos, Zulus, Betis, we are all South Africans. We take great pride in our cultures, but we must find even greater pride in our joint heritage. We have far more things in common than things that separate us as a nation. To sum this up, President Matamela Ramaphosa had this to say during the funeral of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, and I quote, "Our differences must never stand in the way of our nationality and our nationalism," close quote. As we strive to make South Africa great, let's leave no one behind. Diyabulela.
The next speaker is the Honorable Kumalo.
Thank you, House Chairperson. We would like to start by once again paying tribute to Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi for his instrumental role in preserving the Zulu culture. Heritage Day is a national day, important day of national celebration. It is solely about celebrating. And even during a time when our country is riddled with so many challenges emanating from government failures, we ought to take the time to celebrate the treasures of our heritage. Let us celebrate how we have evolved and how we are today able to share in each other's cultures and embrace our diversity, because it is in our unity that we can forge past the failures of the current government. We need to celebrate the spirit of unity that comes through various ways, including sports. And we will remember how, for example, the Springboks, Banyana Banyana, the netball team have united us and given us a national pride we all can own. We need to celebrate our rich supply of natural resources such as gold. We also need to celebrate the beautiful heritage sites of our country. The Mapungubwe cultural landscape and Robben Island are but some of these sites. We need a government that will ensure that its people experience, embrace, and ultimately feel a sense of ownership over these sites. In the past, culture was used to divide us, and now we need to celebrate the understanding of our diversity, which has helped us to respect one another, understand one another, and learn from each other. This we must celebrate because it is part of our healing brought by our democracy. We need to celebrate our well-written and thought-out constitution that seeks to direct both government and its people on how to be treated and how to treat others. And whilst there are failures in this regard from the ANC government, with many of our senior citizens having gone over 2 weeks without their grants, which is definitely a human rights violation. There is hope, South Africa, and we should never lose hope, because a caring DA government is only a few months away. We all can look forward to a few months from today where the DA government will ensure that it is our very own diversity that will get the country right. Dear South Africans, we have a lot to celebrate. We have inherited a rich culture base that has taught us Ubuntu. May we celebrate the fundamental principle that makes us who we are. May we remember Ubuntu in everything we set out to do. South Africa has such a rich history that we stand on, we learn from, build from, and we need to pave a future from, a future we can be proud for future generations to inherit. May we always remember the lessons history has taught us. History has taught us that we are a nation that can get past the worst. History has also taught us that we certainly can't trust the ANC government. So dear South Africans, our country needs you. Gogo Ekaya, unemployed young people, the entrepreneur whose business is struggling, the students in tertiary institutions, the family that has lost a member to crime. I urge all South Africans who have not registered to vote to please do so. South Africa needs you.
The next speaker is the Honorable Mtetwa.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, honorable members. If the meaning of heritage is the inheritance left for the next generations, what inheritance shall we leave for our children and grandchildren? Especially when the culture we are instilling is one of senseless foreign concepts and projects. We are reminded that we are Africans only during Heritage Month. Our pride seems to be in wearing anything that might look African to others rather than the full and proper attires as defined by different tribes and nations of our society. The evidence is in the house. Our children are increasingly inspired by foreign culture. The Louis Vuittons, the Gucci's. There's a lack of African pride in their daily lives. The Makosa. Chair.
Order, honorable members. Order, honorable members. Order, thank you.
I'll give you all mine.
Please continue, honorable member.
Our children are increasingly inspired by foreign cultures, the Louis Vuittons, the Gucci's. There's a lack of African pride in our daily lives. The Makosa brand is one of the few we can truly be proud of, yet prevailing sentiment seems to be one of shame towards our African identity. African children are sometimes denied access to formerly all-white schools because of their African hairstyles, showing a preference to Western-inspired hairstyles over our African pride and beauty. Foreign content often dominates over local content, exposing our children to foreign cultures, norms, and values, which might expose our children to concepts of sexuality at tender age. The Bella Bill, which proposes the sale of alcohol at schools, out of school hours, is a clear departure from the politics of the past, when we used to say our focus was removing ship-ins close to the schools and building more schools instead of prisons. It's the current ANC government's failure to create jobs that has led to using taxpayers' money to consider legalizing prostitution as an alternative career, instead of offering free education to empower young women and restore their dignity and pride. The skewed language preferences go against the idea of language equality that is often spoken about. Only a few African languages are taught in our schools. In some schools, Black children are required to pass Afrikaans and English, yet not compulsory for white children to take and pass African languages. We might be quick to sympathize with whites who struggle with African languages or mispronounce our names and surnames, but why is an African often ridiculed for speaking broken English? If we believe that heritage is merely defined by attires we wear during Heritage Month, can anyone describe what the white South Africans' cultural attires are? We often talk about social cohesion in our documents and manifestos, but when will we see cultural exchange programs? How about encouraging multilingualism and teaching the dress code of various tribes and nations that constitute the rich cultural diversity we often praise? What should we celebrate when we are still overshadowed by the remnants of the tragic past? A history that sometimes resembles the imaginative tales of the discoveries by the figures like Jan van Riebeeck, who claimed to have discovered lands where Black people had lived in harmony without ever hearing a gunshot. Yet today, Africans are taken to court by those who once taught us how to shoot, aiming to claim the land and its resources. It is for this reason EFF is emphasizing the importance of land expropriation without compensation, drawing the parallels with Genesis 1 verse 28. The ANC government introduced arbitration, leaning more towards foreign ideologies of governance. They've subscribed to Western notions of democracy, not recognizing that democracy is not one size fits all. Our vision should be heavily influenced by our African values and norms, providing African solutions to our unique challenges. The current concept of Heritage Month and Day has even shadowed the once vibrant culture of the colored people of this country. The EFF remembered and celebrated this forgotten culture during its 10th anniversary celebration. The ANC government appears to prioritize maintaining a colonial mentality, furthering postmodern cultural colonization. Our national anthem is an example of that accommodates an apologetic tone. Social cohesion should not be the sole responsibility of Blacks. Blacks are often the ones who are integrating, moving into formerly white-only areas and schools, while many whites remain in their suburbs, still influenced by the apartheid era discrimination. We should understand no African can be labeled racist, but might instead be reacting to the past racial discrimination and injustices that still show effects even today. The false promise we are given, a better life for all, doesn't seem like a heritage worth celebrating. Especially
Honourable
when
member,
many
your
of our
time is
people
now
are
expired. Thank you.
mired in poverty, inequality, and racial discrimination.
Honourable
Wars are
member,
24,
your time has
our
expired.
1994.
Please take your seat. Thank you, honourable member. Now, honourable members, all honourable members. It's the member's choice if he wants to wear Gucci shoes. Honourable members, the next speaker is the Honourable Schlangwa.
Thank you very much, Honourable House Chairperson. As sons and daughters of Africa, land is our first heritage. As Africans and as South Africans, our identity, beliefs, culture, and our very livelihoods are all intrinsically and irrevocably connected to the land. Our very being is tied to the land of our birth. Yet millions of South Africans were dispossessed of this heritage. Under the colonizers, under the apartheid regime, we were wrenched from the land of our forefathers, forcibly removed and sent away to resettle in places with no connection to our heritage and culture and to our roots. The governments of the day used legislation for dispossession, including the 1913 Native Land Act and the 1950 Group Areas Act. Our people were robbed of our most fundamental heritage, our land. The IFP's founder and president emeritus, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, was a man who understood that land is the first heritage and first inheritance of all our people. He understood the importance of the connection of all our different cultures to the land of their ancestors. When asked why at his advanced age he still served as a member of this house, his response would always be that he could not rest until the issue of land for all our people has been resolved. With his passing, it is incumbent upon all of us to continue this struggle to ensure the dignity of all our people. Not only did he work tirelessly throughout his life to promote and uphold Zulu culture, traditions, and heritage, but Prince Buthelezi also worked with and supported other cultural communities to assist them.
Honourable Mashele, will you disconnect your microphone, please? You're disrupting the session now. Honourable Schlangwa, please continue.
Thank you, sir. Not only did he work tirelessly throughout his life to support and promote and uphold Zulu culture, traditions, and heritage, but Prince Buthelezi also worked with and supported other cultural communities to assist them in their quest to secure their rights in their land, central to their own identity and spirituality, so that their land could be safeguarded for future generations. At the height of apartheid, Prince Buthelezi stood up to the regime when they tried to hand over the entire Ingwavuma area to the then Kingdom of Swaziland, taking government to court and emerging victorious in protecting South African land and people from being excised from their country. In November 2019, Prince Buthelezi shared the motivation behind the Ngonyama Trust Act which he pioneered, and I quote, "Another decision that has been misconstrued, often deliberately, is the decision I took just before 1994 elections to place the land of KwaZulu into a trust, to remain as communal land administered under indigenous and customary law. The legal advice I had received was that this land on which our people were perched would automatically become state land under the new democratic dispensation. Because the Constitution recognized the institution of traditional leadership, I decided to put this land under a trust with the king as the sole trustee so that the land should continue to be administered through indigenous and customary law," close quote. Instead of leaving the fate of our people in the hands of a yet untested and wholly unknown government, Prince Buthelezi took the decision to and heritage of our people and placed it in the custodianship of the king and Amakos, as had been the practice for many years. Through Prince Buthelezi's leadership, the land remained in the hands of the people. The Ngonyama Trust Act has by now been legitimately enforced in a democratic dispensation for 29 years and has been recognized by the Constitutional Court. Therefore, as we celebrate Heritage Day on the 24th of September, let us take the time to consider the importance of the land as central to our heritage as South Africans, and let us prioritize assistance to those who remain deprived of this heritage so they can receive much needed restitution. Land remains our first heritage, and therefore land must remain our first priority. I thank you, House Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Denner.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. Honourable House Chair, South Africa is one of the most beautiful and culturally diverse countries in the world. With our 12 official languages, different dialects of each, different cultures, races, colors and creeds, we certainly have one of the most interesting and intriguing societies. And despite all these differences, we can all still come together to support our nation's teams, as we saw with the Netball World Cup in August and the current Rugby World Cup, where we can all dress in our green and gold or our Listerine and white and support the box in unison. And contrary to popular belief, unfortunately a belief that is often fueled in this house, ordinary South Africans live together in this country, each to his or her own, in peace and mutual respect. That is why South Africa, left to ordinary South Africans, has work, despite the 9 missing state capture years and 30 years of ANC regime. The theme for today's debate is to celebrate our cultural diversity in a democratic South Africa. But what should we actually be celebrating, Honourable House Chair? The Deputy Minister referred to our joint heritage. What is that joint heritage under the ANC? Is it poor service delivery, a deplorable public health system, an even more deplorable public education system, load shedding, critical water shortages, an unemployment crisis with the likes of those in war-torn countries, the highest crime rate in decades, or the fact that fraud and corruption is at the order of the day? Even our cultural heritage sites are in a deplorable state. One example, which the Deputy Minister also mentioned, is the Robben Island World Heritage Site, which has been neglected to the point where it will cost up to 250 million rand to upgrade and renovate. It has been plagued by financial mismanagement, which is a trademark of the ANC government, and it's thus unsurprising that one of the most famous sites in the country, and maybe the world, bears the marks of ANC rule. Grave sites of ANC freedom fighters in the Lengelihle cemetery has been overrun by raw sewage, like our drinking water. Another example, 80% of sewage in the Free State, for instance, runs into the sources of our drinking water. There are numerous examples where heritage sites are either overrun by sewage, destroyed through vandalism, or mismanaged to the point where there is nothing left. The Wauchope Wesleyan Church in Bloemfontein, where the ANC was founded, Winnie Madikizela Mandela's house in Brandfort, all in a state of decay, after millions was apparently spent, and the same story, always the same story. The Deputy Minister said that our heritage has to be nurtured, but it's clear, Honourable House Chair, that the ANC doesn't care for our cultural heritage. They don't even care for their own. Nor do they care that ordinary South Africans have to sit in the dark at night, that our drinking water is being polluted by sewage, as long as they have the keys to the union buildings and their fingers in the till. Wat ons werklik vandag kan en moet vier, is gewone Suid-Afrikaners met hulle liefde vir onderskeie tale, kulture en erfenis, vir hulle mense en vir ander mense, vir hulle wederwysige respek, strewe na vooruitgang, selfbeskikking, deursettingsvermoë, veerkragtigheid en hulle sin vir humor. Agbare voorsitter, nog 'n gedeelde kenmerk van Suid-Afrikaners is ons vermoë om oplossings te vind, struikelblokke te oorkom en planne te maak om te oorleef en vooruit te gaan. Wat ons dus ook moet vier, is die feit dat Suid-Afrikaners nie onder 'n kalkoen uitgebroei is nie. You can fool some of the people all of the time and all of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. Die 4+4 met hierdie erfenisdag, die feit dat Suid-Afrikaners nie langer deur die ANC geflou sal word nie. Ons sal
Honourable
het maak
member,
met julle by die
your time
stemmes
has now
in 2024.
expired.
We
Thank
will
you.
no longer be fooled. I thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honourable Thring. Order, honourable members.
Honourable House Chairperson, the ACDP acknowledges that South Africa is rich in diverse cultures, languages, and traditions. By celebrating and promoting this diversity, we can preserve and promote how South Africans are all interconnected in a profound way. Our long history of racial and ethnic divisions has its roots not only in the former apartheid system, but also by the prejudices and stereotypes of individuals and groups. These divisions created deep-seated prejudices and tensions that sadly continue to affect our society today. We are, as South Africans, a diverse nation, rich in our different languages, tribes, cultures, religions, and worldviews. We may be different, but we must understand that we are one as South Africans. Our differences should not be eroded by political correctness. Our heritage represents life, joy, and hope, the diversity of thoughts, ideas, and personalities that makes our country a beautiful one to live in. It signals an openness to ideas, a willingness to listen to others, and acceptance of those who are different from us. And it is for this reason that we should all fight the cancel culture, which subscribes that if you do not agree with their view, they will cancel you, deplatform you, and make you persona non grata. The ACDP commits to creating an inclusive society where all individuals are valued and respected for their unique backgrounds, beliefs, and traditions. This naturally means that those who hold to a biblical or religious worldview should never be prejudiced by legislation which infringes on their freedom of religion, expression, and conscience as enshrined within our Constitution. Where this infringement happens, the voice of the ACDP will never be silent.
Hello?
Celebrating our cultural diversity does not diminish our collective identity as South Africans. Instead, it strengthens the fabric of our nation. It allows us to confront and challenge discrimination and inequality faced by marginalized cultural groups and promotes a platform to address issues of social justice. The ACDP will not cower to political correctness, which sacrifices freedom of religion, speech, and conscience on the altar of political expediency, but we will work tirelessly in uniting our nation, understanding the biblical injunction which states that every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself will not stand. But where there is
Honourable
unity,
member, your
God
time has
commands
now
a blessing.
expired.
South
Thank you.
Africa, the ACDP commits to building a united South Africa, one sovereign
Honourable
nation
member,
under
your
God.
time
Thank you.
has expired. Thank you. The UDM. The ATM. Good.
House Chairperson. House Chair, thank you. For almost 30 years, we have celebrated the cultural diversity of our beloved country as one of our greatest strengths. Our former President Mandela said, when our first democratically elected government decided to make Heritage Day one of our national days, we did so because we knew that our rich and varied cultural heritage has a profound power to help build our new nation, in the vein of celebrating shared culture rather than focusing on cultural divisions. And since then, it has been a tradition that in this assembly and across the 9 provinces, politicians from all represented parties participate in debates like the one we're having today. I expect across the country, politicians representing all the political parties that make up our multi-party democracy will make compelling speeches about the diversity of our country and our unique cultures. We will hear speeches urging South Africans to celebrate and unite in that diversity. But some of those same political leaders and their parties will enter the looming election period, as they have the ones before, seeking to exploit our differences rather than celebrate our similarities. Devoid of compelling arguments to persuade voters to support them, they will resort to creating divisions based on race and ethnicity. They will seek to invoke fear. Some will resort to the old apartheid tactic of swart gevaar to create a lager of minority voters from whom they will build their political base. As the National Assembly elected to represent the people, we cannot kumbaya through this debate, calling for a united South Africa built on the strength of our diversity, without holding the hypocrites who constantly seek to divide us to account. Our progress as a nation to overcome our undeniable crises and challenges cannot be achieved through division based on race. That experiment was forced upon us and thankfully failed. The only differences we should exploit for voters are our differences in ideas. We participate in politics and contest elections against each other because we believe we have better solutions for the legacy we have inherited and the problems the people of our country face on a daily basis. South Africans of all races and cultures have far more in common than anything that divides us. Let us again remember Madiba's message on our diversity. It is not our diversity which divides us. It is not our ethnicity or religion or culture that divides us. Since we have achieved our freedom, there can be only one division amongst us, between those who cherish democracy and those who do not. On this Heritage Day, House Chair, we call on South Africans not to follow those who encourage us to fear the so-called others. They will not build a united, prosperous South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Winkler.
House Chair. We are the people that stand on the shoulders of giants. From Nelson Mandela, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and Helen Suzman, to the everyday individuals who have made great sacrifices for greater good. We are the people of a valley of 1,000 hills and where the Atlantic meets the Indian Ocean. We are the people of the Addo National Elephant Park in the Eastern Cape and the Blyde River Canyon in Mpumalanga. We are the people of the Zulu Reed dance, of Imbeleko, of the Festival of Lights, of the rock art of the Khoisan, of the Cape Minstrels, and of Dilangar. We are the people of the cradle of humankind, a birthplace of humanity where our ancestors took their first breaths. This is our shared heritage. This is our legacy, and this is what is worth fighting for. We are South Africa. I'm honored to stand here today and to greet South Africans from across the cultural spectrum. Against all odds, as the rest of the world waited with bated breath, we transitioned to democracy in 1994, where we birthed a new heritage, one of unity in diversity. We demonstrated to the world that when the going gets tough, South Africans get tougher. And there are those who wish to divide us through our differences and to sow hatred in our hearts. But we know that our differences are our greatest strength. And as South Africans, We cannot and we will not allow our diversity to be used as a weapon against one another. There is a beautiful saying, umuntu, ungumuntu, ungabantu. A person is a person through other people. I am because you are. We are all human beings. That is our most fundamental shared connection and heritage. Our common humanity is the foundation from which our collective aspirations and dreams emanate. This is what our great leaders exemplified. Ubuntu. And this is the legacy that we need to honor and protect. Our democracy will only thrive not when we build higher walls, but when we build longer tables. We are living, breathing monuments to our heritage. Our South African spirit is unrivaled, and our collective culture is so unique and vibrant that it is world-renowned. It is our immense warmth and friendliness, the radiant smiles that greet us and those who visit our beautiful shores. It's the camaraderie of communities that descend on the local watering hole to cheer on the Springboks. It's the pride when Banyana breaks barriers. It's our fiery Durban curries, sampan beans, fireside potjies, and pickled fish. It's a country dancing in unison to Jerusalem. And it's our collective panic when there's a Marmite shortage. And so even though there's so much that's gone wrong, state capture, a country plunged into darkness, and we, our young people, are robbed of their future, we stay and we fight because we know we, the people of South Africa, we are what is right with our country. And we, the people, will decide in 2024 what heritage we leave for our children. So let us remember this and let us tread carefully.
The next speaker is the Honorable Kachwa. Order, honorable members.
That was a Heritage Day speech. Yeah. Honorable House Chairperson, honorable members, citizens of South Africa, Lochan. Honorable members, the Constitution of South Africa provides a vision of a united, prosperous, non-racial and non-sexist society, a country that belongs to all who live in it, united in its diversity. The NDP acknowledges that to build a socially cohesive society, South Africa needs to reduce poverty and inequality by broadening opportunity and employment through economic inclusion, education, and skills. It acknowledges that to build a socially cohesive South Africa, we must promote mutual respect and inclusiveness, acknowledge all as being equal before the law, and deepen the appreciation of citizens' responsibilities and obligations towards one another. As such, we must appreciate and acknowledge the heritage landscape and ecosystem as bigger and broader than a Department of Sports, Arts and Culture imperative. In essence, the preservation, protection, and promotion of our heritage landscape and ecosystem is the responsibility of all departments and their entities, social institutions, and all citizens of this country. Our inability to be intentional and coordinated on this important task will lead to the continued neglect and exploitation of our heritage landscape. For example, the exploitation seen with the mass production of our cultural wear in China and by some international brands. I mean, from the smallest towns in the Eastern Cape, Chief Whip, to Main Reef China Mall, to Emaraba Stats, kuko umbhaco othungiswa eChina, uphinde ubuye apha uthengiswe to us. When bekhona omamngqongqo, bekhona omaleta who can make this mbhaco themselves and who we should be buying it from. I also don't want to leave out Meko Limpopo, ebayetsang diele, ebayetsang shbelane. We should be buying that yele and that shbelane from those from Limpopo, and not emachineni. These are challenges the ANC government is cognizant of and has worked towards addressing, in harnessing the preservation, protection, and promotion of our heritage and culture. Honorable members, the creative and cultural industries can contribute substantially to small business development, job creation, and urban development. The South African Cultural Observatory shares that the cultural creative industries contributed 2.9% to the GDP in 2020, employing about 1 million workers. In that 2.9%, the design and creative services contributed 51 billion, the audiovisual and interactive media contributed 48.4 billion, and the visual arts and crafts made up 50% of the cultural and creative industry's contribution to the GDP. Some of the faces that represent the above contributions include the likes of Laduma Ngokolo, who owns the Makosa brand, which has now become globally recognized. It includes Nobile Nkosi, an owner of the owner of Jewelry Village, Thandi Sibisi, a Black woman owning a gallery, and Nkensani Rihlamfu, a Joburg-based sculptor whose rope sculptures range from 60,000 Rand to 650,000 Rand and are globally recognized. Recently, we've all had a moment to reconnect with our roots through the television series like Kamkulu, as well as Shaka Ilembe, that has empowered our economy and communities by creating over 9,000 jobs. Some of the pieces of the wardrobe of that production come from the very famous hostel of Johannesburg, KwaMai. This is just but a glimpse of the economic value that the creative sector can contribute further to our country and its local communities. In the financial year 21-22, the Department of Tourism supported 39 projects across all 9 provinces towards the development of the heritage tourism economy. A key development was the Bavian Sleuth Interpretative Center, which is a UNESCO proclaimed World Heritage Site in the Eastern Cape. Many of the projects of the Department of Tourism, such as the review of the Tourism Master Plan of the Cradle of Humankind World Heritage Site, were done by consultants and companies that were predominantly owned or managed by historically disadvantaged individuals for them to render expert or technical support. Under the Department of Science and Innovation, the ANC government has also prioritized astro-tourism, so astronomy and tourism together, as part of our heritage tourism imperatives. Honorable members, our heritage and indigenous beliefs are well found within the science of astronomy. For example, last year, July, the Department of Science and Innovation sponsored the International Indigenous Astronomy Conference, which was organized by the Indigenous Knowledge System Center of the Northwest University in Mafikeng. One of the highlights of the conference was the discovery of indigenous astronomy research initiatives at Inzalo Yelanga in Mpumalanga, which is an ancestral heritage pilgrimage known as the birthplace of the sun. It has the oldest solar calendar in the world. In 2021, the DSI funded a group of students and researchers to visit the site and to observe the celebration of the new year, which is normally observed in September annually. Inzalo Yelanga in Mpumalanga, honorable members, is one but many astro-tourism sites in South Africa. Many of us are very familiar with Carnarvon and Sutherland in the Northern Cape. It is for this reason that the DSI and the Department of Tourism have collaborated to unlock opportunities in astro-tourism, positioning South Africa as a world-class astro-tourism destination. A joint steering committee and working group has been established to facilitate the development of an astro-tourism strategy. The strategy aims to promote indigenous celestial narratives, infrastructure development, inclusive tourism growth and partnership, human capacity development, indigenous community development, and functional astro-tourism streams. The strategy prioritizes holistic astronomy experiences that combine scientific knowledge, cultural heritage, and economic development. It highlights the invaluable contributions of indigenous communities in observing celestial events, cultural interpretations, and how they are embedded in the fabric of our history. This is elegantly depicted through the global competitive advantage of our indigenous star law section, underscoring the connections between astronomy and cultural traditions. Science, and science,
Akusinto ephume West, akusinto emhlophe so. Science just looks like this girl that is standing in front of you. Currently, the DSI and the Department of Tourism are engaging various departments and business stakeholders on the strategy for support and to create awareness for this astrotourism strategy. Honorable members, culture is a social construct. It is not static. It is continuously evolving, reacting and aligning with the people of that time and their socio-economic and political landscape. And although culture can be used as a to cultivate transformation, it is also important to recognize that in the last couple of years, we have seen a culture that contradicts our national identity as informed by the values embedded in our constitution. For example, rape culture and the culture of corruption. These social constructs should not characterize the South African society. They are un-South African behavior. Corruption is un-South African. Rape culture is un-South African. Dictated by our constitution and its clarity on non-sexism, it is un-South African behavior to rape, harass, or kill women and members of the LGBTQIA community. So we will not accept GBV as a norm in our communities. One of the factors undermining the public sector is the culture of corruption. We must be relentless and consistent in our efforts to eliminate corruption, restore a culture of accountability, and revive the principles of Batupili. The DPSA has done work in this area through the Public Administration Ethics, Integrity, and Disciplinary Technical Assistance Unit, DAU. To this end, we must continue to support and strengthen these processes, which seek to detect and punish wrongdoers who undermine our people and the country's developmental agenda. We will not accept the use of public funds to enrich individuals. We will not accept public servants who do not play their part in the accountability ecosystem. We thus welcome programs of the Department of Higher Education, such as the Changing Mentalities program, launched a few weeks ago to address sexist culture in institutions of higher learning and inevitably in our communities. We also welcome the inclusion of civic education in the curriculum of TVET colleges. Culture, belonging, and identity are inseparable. A people will only believe in what is said to be South African culture when they feel they belong socially, culturally, economically, and even politically. And through this sense of belonging, perhaps we could see increased active citizenry, individual accountability, and social compacting. The country's rich heritage, cultural legacy, diversity, and the creativity of its people mean that South Africa can offer unique stories, opportunities, knowledge, and products to the world. And it must be us who drive it to the world. Our artistic endeavors and expressions can foster values, facilitate healing, and restore national pride. As the granddaughter of Onyambose, the granddaughter of Ondwandwe, Nabo Baselangeni, we wish all South Africans a great Heritage Month as we reflect on imvelaphi yethu na apho sisaya khona. Sithokoze sihlale.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Jafta.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. As we celebrate this year's Heritage Day, we remember the words of Honourable MP Gallo that traditional leadership is front and center of our being as Africans. We are reminded of the fortitude of the late Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who was a pioneer of the Zulu nation. Chief Buthelezi embraced the heritage of the Zulu people and fought for the recognition of the institution of traditional leadership. He held the fort and championed the recognition of traditional leadership. We also celebrate the work of traditional leadership in the Eastern Cape and across the board. As we mark this year's Heritage Day, we must be rooted in our heritage, in our culture, and in our tradition. Chief Buthelezi and MP Gallo stand out as the primary caregivers of our traditional norms and values. They embrace our differences but celebrate our diversity. There is a great sense of pride in embracing one's culture religion, tradition. As we mark this year's Heritage Day, Honorable Chair, we remember the great strides made by these leaders to demand a stake in our new democracy. We remember their efforts to entrench customary law as one of the laws under the democratic constitution. In celebrating this year's Heritage Day, we suggest that the theme marking our Heritage Day to celebrate the institution, culture, and norms, traditional communities be our rallying point. As a nation, we can never be complete outside the strictures of our traditional values. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Luate.
Honorable House Chair, lest we forget, 24th September was originally celebrated as Shaka Day in KwaZulu-Natal by dissolving clan lines and replacing them with allegiance to the Zulu nation. Smaller tribes were welded into one Zulu nation. Mushweshwe, a contemporary of King Shaka, also drew together the scattered Sotho people, driven apart by Zulu and Ndebele raids into one Sotho nation. With the advent of our democracy, Nelson Mandela dismantled the legacy of apartheid and actively fostered racial reconciliation. He used rugby as a symbol of South African unity. His pet project, the forging of a common national identity, has tragically fallen by the wayside. Nelson Mandela ensured that while our constitution recognized the injustices of the past and honored those who suffered for justice and freedom in South Africa, our country belonged to all who live in it, united in our diversity. Given this day is meant to be both a day of celebration of who we respectively are and how democracy was won and secured for everyone. Regrettably, many of our diverse people's expectations have not been met by a long way. So many of our fellow citizens who expect to enjoy the dividends of democracy have unfortunately very little to appreciate and celebrate. It needs no rocket scientist to awaken all of us and seriously alarm all of us as also to reality that the lives of our majority of people who entrusted us with their votes have moved from bad to worse. The majority of South Africans have no confidence to look to the future. They are also discouraged to look back. We need to ask the question, why? What do they see in respect of our heritage sites? They see, in many instances, neglect, not respect. Our heritage sites that should have been maintained with pride and a sense of patriotism are gradually sliding into ruin, and some are even being hijacked in broad daylight. Who in the streets know what our Heritage Day is really about, or where our heritage sites are located, and why they are designated in such? Gross neglect of the past, the present, and the future is the distinguishing feature of our government. Let the Heritage Day honor our heroes.
Honourable Member, your time is expired.
Preserve the good things and traditions of our inherited past. Incentivize our goals of achieving a common
Honourable Member, your
national
time is expired.
Thank you, House.
Thank you. The next speaker is the Honourable Nyonso.
Honorable Chair, Heritage Day as a public holiday was suggested in Parliament as a recognition of Shaka Day on 24 September, in the way that 21st March was also recognized as Shabil and Langa Day. September was then celebrated as Heritage Month to include other elements in the African indigenous knowledge systems. We must, however, not distort the inheritance of the military prowess of King Shaka's mighty army. Their strategy in the battlefield, especially in Bondozengomo, wherein Shaka attacked the enemy from both angles in a hammer and anvil system. Shaka's army used the tactics short and sharp spears to be near their opponent and to see white eyes of the enemy before destroying them. This was Shaka's strategy not to abuse weapons by throwing spears away behind enemy lines. This was a waste of resources. This tactic is similar to the fighting methods of the mighty Azanian People's Liberation Army, who used one bullet for one bodied enemy among the settlers' regime's oppressive force. APLA fought against real human beings who were identified as foreign invaders or colonial settlers. The military heritage is part and parcel of the fighting methods of the African people, inspired by King Shaka Kasenzangakon. Military heritage is a practice that is not excluded from the cultural rituals performed by traditional healers, from the food prepared for warriors, from the ululation of women, from the beer and other refreshments prepared for the coming war, and ultimately from washing of the spears to remove the blood in the dark spirits of the enemy. Our heritage goes from one generation to another. It is an indivisible part of the history, the present we live in now, in the future with its intergenerational links. It is unique stem burned into our skin in inner entrails. Our heritage flows in our blood. Today, in South Africa, reactionary elements want to rediscover and sanitize the historic inheritance of the African people. African people have always known their inheritance and their way of life. Their practice, their belief system in family gatherings. You cannot rediscover what has always been there. You cannot rediscover us. We have always been there since time immemorial. All we need to do is to celebrate the African languages, our history, the deeds of our patriotic heroes, the monuments that we erected in historical locations so that we do not forget. Only those with a colonial mentality can try to distort and water down what we stand for. The PAC says the one and only heritage upon which all others are based upon is the land of our forefathers and mothers. The land was stolen from the indigenous African via the British-based Act of Union of 1909. The rise of Azania is the best heritage that we all deserve. Izwelethu. Uzobanjwa phela.
Thokoze Mhlonishwa. Mhlonishwa Hendricks.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair. Honorable House Chair, your heritage dress symbolizes a life of courage and service, and all of those dress like that is recognized. Muslims in South Africa have a proud history of celebrating the advent of Islam in South Africa nearly 375 years ago. We also celebrate the birth of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and other significant commemoration events like the Eid. This month, Honorable House Chair, on the first of the new Islamic month, Rabi al-Awwal, celebrating with the 16th of September 2023 in the ICASA precinct, where Sheikh Yusuf, the founder of Islam, was banished as a political prisoner, Muslim women took the lead in celebrating the birth of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, which this year coincides with Heritage Month. These women from ICASA and surrounds like Sunfleet and Fori are upholding the tradition of Sheikh Yusuf. In a horse and cart parade, they proceeded to the mosque where they recited praises of the Prophet. Cape Town is blessed with hundreds of such organizations consisting of women. The annual Mass Maulid event is the most notable heritage event which takes place in Cape Town, and we ask honorable members to watch it on social media and the TV. Heritage Month is the birth of Prophet Muhammad, and all heritage activities by Muslims revolve around his message delivered to all mankind. During the month of the Prophet's birthday, mosques and many Muslim families throughout the country engage in various activities such as lectures, poetry, and devotional songs. Sheikh Yusuf, who was a founder of Islam in South Africa, more than 375 years ago in Zandvlei, was awarded posthumously Companion of Olive Tambo Gold Medal for fighting colonialism. He left behind a rich Islamic heritage, followed by Muslims in South Africa. Sheikh Yusuf introduced a lagu, a rhythm which goes like this. Salam, ya salam, alaykum salam, ya Rasulullah. This rhythm motivated political prisoners to rise up against colonialism and is the first revolutionary recitation in South Africa. South Africans, like many communities in other countries, carry proud heritage and cultural identities. The Minister of Culture have invited communities to display their culture. It is therefore not surprising that there's a rise in search for their cultural identity among young people desperate to claim their heritage and culture.
Mhlonishwa Hendricks.
Thank you very much, Honorable.
Mhlonishwa Nqobo, angithi chebechebe kuwe khe uhlale kancane. Ke sithathe umhlonishwa uSheikh Imam.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Now, we declared Heritage Day in South Africa in order to bring the diverse communities in South Africa together. However, 30 years later, we are divided on race, on religion, on tribe, on the wealth we have. And this is largely due to political parties and political leaders for relevance. Yes, some are calling for representation for the colored community. You hear others talking about everything belongs to the Black community. You're hearing those that say we represent a certain sector. And clearly, we are forgetting about the wise words of our former leader and president, Nelson Mandela, when he said that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. And that for that reason, we call South Africa a rainbow nation. But I find, Chairperson, that many of my colleagues, of those that I've listened to, seem to have short memories or memory lapse when we talk about culture, tradition in South Africa. We often tend to forget about the first indigenous nation of this country, the Khoi and San, the rightful heirs. We often forget about the war between the Khoi and San and the Portuguese. Had they not defeated the Portuguese, of course, we would have been under Portuguese rule today. But what is very important, Chairperson, to note is that the first indigenous nation in this country have been forgotten, have been marginalized, have been neglected. To such an extent, even their heritage sites are being sold today. An ideal example, of course, Chairperson, is the Two Rivers project of such significance to the Khoi and San. Yet that property was sold to international investors. When will we recognize the first indigenous nation? We have 12 languages in the country we speak about, 13 languages we're going into. But what about the language of the Khoi and the San? When will we in South Africa forget about our tribes, our religion, our culture, but all come together as one united nation in South Africa so that we could prosper as a single nation? Why do politicians, Chairperson, want to take advantage of the fact that when they want relevance because of political support and votes, then they want to divide us on race and religion and tradition and culture? South Africa has a diverse communities in this and I think what I want to urge, Chairperson, is this. Given the fact that we are now going to rebuild Parliament, and I know we've discussed this in the Chief Forum, that indeed that when Parliament must resemble the diverse culture of the different communities.
Thank you, Mhlonishwa.
Thank you very much. That's the least we can do. Thank you, Chairperson.
What is it, Honorable Member?
Chairperson, with due respect, I just got the impression that he was sitting in the bathroom with a shower behind him.
So you have to make such a noise without even being sure of what you're talking about. Ilungelo elifanelekileyo
Mine by now. It's fine, but I don't like it. It's too flat. And it's too sandy. Choma, why don't you go out with Farad?
Mbambani.
Hey, but who can I be
Honorable
that?
Mbambani.
Farad.
Honorable Mbambani. Vala mam. Ungaqhubeka.
Thank you, House Chairperson. On Sunday, the 24th of September, South Africans from all walks of life will be celebrating Heritage Day. On this day, we celebrate our cultures and the diversity of our beliefs and traditions. We are a diverse nation and we celebrate our heritage and cultural diversity in many different ways. Our diversity as South Africans is what makes us who we are as a nation. It is what makes our nation beautiful. House Chairperson, in today's debate, we are called upon to reflect on the cultural diversity in a democratic South Africa. This cultural diversity is what makes us special as a nation, and we have a rich tapestry of culture in this country. We are a rainbow nation with many different cultures, languages, and ethnic origins, which makes us exceptional and dynamic. But we also understand this fundamental truth, that out of many, we are one. As our Constitution reminds us, South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. During this Heritage Month, we must embrace our diversity. We must always remember that as diverse as we are one nation with one future, and that there is far more that brings us together than that which seeks to tear us apart. We must never allow those who seek to use our differences to divide us. Our diversity should always be our biggest strength. House Chairperson, while we are celebrating our cultural diversity, we must also be mindful of the challenges that our country faces. The fact of the matter is that over 70% of young people in this country will be celebrating Heritage Day while wondering where they can find a job. Millions of South Africans will be celebrating the Heritage Day in darkness because of the crippling load shedding. Our senior citizens will be celebrating Heritage Day while wondering if they will receive their old age grants on time next month. Many students across the country will celebrate Heritage Day, not knowing when their NSFAS allowances will be paid out due to the problems created by the new direct payment system. Thousands of South Africans will be celebrating while wondering where their next meal is going to come from. But there is still a reason to be hopeful. South Africans from all cultural backgrounds have always stood together in difficult times. And the 2024 general election is yet another pivotal moment in South Africa's history where South Africans from all walks of life have to stand together and deliver a new government. A government that will always put people first, and that government is the DA-led multi-party government, which will be able to build a just, inclusive, and prosperous South Africa based on opportunity, freedom, and security for all of its citizens. Under this DA-led multi-party government, South Africans will be able to celebrate their heritage and cultural diversity without having to worry about load shedding. Under this DA-led multi-party government, the older persons will celebrate Heritage Month next year without having to worry about whether or not they will be receiving their social grants on time the following month. Under this DA-led multi-party government, there will be a growing economy and job opportunities, especially for the unemployed young people, so that they can be able to celebrate Heritage Month next year, knowing that they are able to provide for themselves and their families. I thank you.
Stop
dreaming, man. Stop dreaming.
Ilunga elihloniphekileko lendlu.
Madam Speaker.
Inkosi. Is there a point of order?
Yes.
Okay.
Aroused on point 66. There's a person on the platform that keeps on interrupting. He's done it while we had a speaker on the platform and immediately thereafter.
Okay.
Yeah, you haven't taken care of it. Thank you.
I was not observant. I'll check that. Ilunga elihloniphekileko lendlu, Inkosi uMandela.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, Molweni, Dumelang, good afternoon, goeiemiddag. I couldn't help but be reminded of two powerful events in the early days of our transition to democracy that captured the essence of today's theme, celebrating our cultural diversity in a democratic South Africa. The past few weeks since the start of the Rugby World Cup 2023 has kept us riveted to our phones, tablets, laptops, televisions, and big screens. As a nation united in support of Amabhokobhoko, it provided good reason to reminisce those wonderful moments when the nation in all its diversity stood together as one. No irony was lost on the fact that nobody believed that South Africa could achieve a peaceful transition to democracy, given its painful and traumatic past, characterized by centuries of colonialism and decades of apartheid, in which the fundamental human dignity of the majority of South Africans was denied. Nobody could believe that out of extrajudicial killings, hit squads, impimpis, vigilantes, murders, assassinations, life incarceration, interrogation, torture, and exile, a new nation could come together as one. On the 27th of April, 1994, it happened and set in motion a process that has had highly elated and emotional episodes that bared the soul of the nation. We first repeated that magic in the 1995 World Cup when, inspired by Madiba, wearing the number 6 Springbok jersey of Francois Pienaar, led his team and indeed the entire nation to victory in the Rugby World Cup against all odds. Perhaps we are a nation motivated by adversity, tragedy, challenges, and we rally our best when the odds are against us. So it was at the dawn of democracy, the odds were stacked against us as a recalcitrant Inkatha refused to be part of the transition process. Honorable Hlengwa, much has been said by Prince of Pindangen, the Prime Minister to the Zulu monarch and earnest acting President of the Republic of South Africa since his demise. It was in no small measure due to his tenacity that a paradigm of exceptionalism became the default as the Zulu nation benefited from the transition to democracy the way no other has to date. Out of that volatile moment was born a compromise, protected traditional lands, and saw the formation of Ingonyama Trust as it assisted in securing the participation of the then monarch, His Majesty King Zwelithini KaBheka, and Inkatha, now the IFP, in the landmark of the 1994 elections. I recollect this part of our transition to democracy, not to eulogize, but to make the argument that the same cultural recognition should be accorded and extended to the full diversity of South Africa's traditional leadership, such as Skukune, Mampuru of Bapedi, and Queen Mjaji of Balobedu. To transform culture and its political economy, we must start with the recognition of the fullness of our diversity. We must stop perpetuating the myths as if the Zulu nation is the only nation in South Africa. We must stop perpetuating the myths that the Eastern Cape is the land of tossers, whereas there is a rich traditional and cultural history of Amampondo, Amampondomse, and Abatembu, reflected in our linguistic diversity, arts, crafts, rituals, dress, and well-documented history. We have many films about the life of Shaka Zulu that perpetuate this myth. Where is the narrative of films of the defeat of the Portuguese hero of conquest, Francois de Almeida, at the Battle of Salt River, right in these lands. This was a big deal, a momentous event, though it is not yet fully claimed, owned, or celebrated, because we have not accorded the Khoi and the San people, along with all other traditional leaders, their due recognition, rights, and restitution, as we have done for the Zulu nation. We only truly start valuing our diversity by creating an inclusive environment where differences are respected and the history, unique perspectives, and customs of all are recognized. We must recognize the Rainbow Nation and its significance as a character of our national identity by the full inclusion of its diverse expression and celebration of all the strands that weave the beautiful tapestry of what makes us South Africans. We must fully recognize the role of culture in conquering and addressing the social ills such as bullying, gender-based violence, femicide. We must draw on our rich history in these difficult times and our collective will to overcome adversity. We have not done justice to the economic impact of culture and heritage and will not do so as long as we cling to the paradigm of restitution that starts with the South African Native Land Act of 1913, whilst ignoring the wars of dispossession bravely waged by our heroes since the inception of the colonial project. This Heritage Day, we must invoke the memory of all our brave heroes and heroines. We must celebrate and claim the legacies of the Gorikona leader Auchumayo and his niece Krotoa, who were imprisoned on Robben Island in 1658 by Jan van Riebeeck. We must recollect and claim the history of the 1686 Dutch vessel Stavanice, which shipwrecked at Port St. John's, and the survivors who first encountered Amampondo and Abatembu in the Eastern Cape. We must claim and celebrate the legacy of the 1855 Amaxhosa Chief Siolo, the grandson of Ndlambe, who was imprisoned on Robben Island after the Battle of Mlangeni. We must claim the legacy of the 1858 when Amanxiga Chief Maqoma and his wife Kaki were also imprisoned on the island along with Maqoma's half-brother Tonto, Pato of the Gunukwebe line and his son Dilima, Stokwe, Mapasa, and Fadana of Abatembu, who were all also imprisoned there after the cattle killing of 1856 to 1887, which were part of the wars of dispossession with the British. We must claim the legacy of the 1869-1870 captives from the first Corona War who were sent to Robben Island, including Pete Boy, David Derrickson, Jan Kivido, and Karel Reuter. We must claim the legacy of the Second Corona War of 1880 that saw the imprisonment of leaders such as Thomas Pofada, Jan Magals, Jacobus Afrikaner, John Adam, and Klaas Pofada. We must claim the legacy of the 1874 of Amahlubi chief Langalbalele, who was imprisoned for treason and later taken to the farm Eidvlegt in what is today Pinelands. We must keep the stories of these brave leaders alive. It is our story. We must ensure that our monarchs in South Africa are equally honored, and the Ngonyama Trust model must be applied to all kingdoms so that our traditional monarchs and communities are likewise beneficiaries of restorative justice and restitution. As we once again rally the nation behind Amabhokobhoko this weekend in the Rugby World Cup 2023 against Ireland, let us spur on by the slogan, "Together we can." Let us once again ignite our skies with the memories of victory at the Rugby World Cup in 1995 under the iconic leadership of Francois Pienaar, the brave victory of 2007 under John Smith, and that triumphal moment in 2019 when Captain Courageous Siya Kolisi lifted the Webb Ellis Trophy for the third time. We stand on the brink of history as we march towards victory again in France. We wish our boys well and send them our message of support. A nation united in diversity can and will overcome all adversity. Together we can, together we will. God bless South Africa and grant us victory. Nkosi sikelela i-Africa.
Go Boke.
Loko kusiletha emaphethelweni wenkulumo mpikisano yethu. Now I will ask the secretary to read the second order.
Consideration of request for approval by Parliament of the 2003 UNESCO Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage in terms of Section 231, Sub 2 of Constitution 1996.
Thank you. Musibia. Ixesha ngelakho to introduce the report. Ma'am
Okay.
Sibia, you are on virtual, yes. Proceed.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you. Sarma. Oh.
Unomraro ma.
Yes, ma, but I'm coming.
But siyakuzwa.
Sure.
The whip in the house, anyone to take the report up? Please assist quickly. Who whip Okona? Isa?
The whip is not
Okay.
there.
Let me skip order 2. I will come back to order 2. And in the meantime, can the whip try to ayenziwa le nto yenzako leyo. Right. We will go to order 3 and then we'll come back to order 2. My apologies. Siza kubawa ukhona sewukhona. Oh, sizokubawa ukhona ozoyenza emva kwale order. The secretary, please read the third order as we check.
Consideration of draft notice determining remuneration of commissioners of Electoral Commission of South Africa for 2022-2023.
Are there any objections, honorable members, to the approval of the draft notices determining the remuneration of the commissioners of the Electoral Commission of South Africa, that is the IEC, as it appears on the order paper?
Hello.
Ja,
Hello.
mama, sizokubiza jama kancane.
Okay.
Are there any objections? No objections, agreed to. We now go back to the second order. Okay, so Rehema, Ma'am Svia.
Yes, ma.
Kubegage.
Okay. The Portfolio Committee on Sports, Arts and Culture, having considered the Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage and the explanatory memorandum. Yo.
Mama, akho iyekele sibize la ubaba uMbuyane.
Okay.
Baba Umbuyane, are you helping us? Oh, okay. We proceed to order 4. Baba Mhlongo, hlala phasi. Ngomoya wenkereke siyakubawa. The 4th order, the secretary, please.
ready,
Consideration of draft notice determining remuneration of councillors of Independent Communications Authority of South Africa.
Thank you. Honorable members, are there any objections to the approval of the draft notices determining the remuneration of councillors of Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, ICASA, as it appears on the order paper? No objections agreed to. I'm giving this portfolio committee the last opportunity now. Mamsvia.
I'm ready, Chairperson. Sorry.
Rakela phambili ma.
Okay, the Portfolio Committee on Sports, Arts and Culture, having considered the Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage and the explanatory memorandum on the 2003 UNESCO Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage, referred to it in terms of Rule 342, subsection 2 of the Rules of the National Assembly, recommends at the House in terms of section 231, subsection 2 of the Constitution, approves the said convention. But also, Chairperson, the committee has also noted the objection of the Democratic Alliance. I thank you, Chairperson. Report to be considered, Chair.
Thank you. We now recognize parties wishing to make declarations. Mhlongo, ungathuka baba.
I think getting is good is over in charge. 2024. ANC is not prepared to speak about full agenda. About kwenzakalani. Woza 2024, woza. We are not prepared. And that's good kwenzakalani.
Honorable Mhlongo.
Order.
Tshepo. Honorable Mhlongo, can we please go back to what we are dealing with?
Yeah, but it's my time. It's a point of debate.
Yeah, mar debate man.
Gabonagala ukuthi ANC iyahluleka ukuleader. They can't even stand before the nation to talk about the preservation of intangible cultural heritage that aligns with UNESCO Charter. The purpose of this charter is very clear, but the implementation thereof first and the review of this charter is so important. Accountability with regard to the ICH should be within the scope of the draft. Who will be accountable? Gabonisa namanje ukuthi ANC ayikwazi kuyiletha bavele bathi I've objected. It's not about only objection, there's a sustaining. We as the Democratic Alliance, we support the UNESCO mandate, but we don't support just a blank check. We cannot support the department to sign an MOU that has note, Deputy Minister in absentia. First year, there's an open check with reflection of 5 million rand. 2, second year, the open check with 15 million rand. The third year, an open check with 51 million rand. There are no breakdowns, there are no details. What will happen to the total 71 million rand that is going to be spent for this UNESCO? Thina njengeqembu le-Democratic Alliance sifuna i-government ezoba open and transparency. Abafuna ukusipha ama-detail we-report. We don't know who's going to account, We don't know how money is going to be used for this convention. Now, sitting in the Democratic Alliance, we object and we reject this report. We're still waiting for the report that was tabled to cabinet. We're still waiting for the report that was tabled to cabinet. We don't have it. Now we believe good open government. We believe good transparency and accountability. But the ANC government, prepared, counter. They did not even introduce the subject. Democratic Alliance, the former minister, culture. Maybe like 71 million rand, lama flag. Who knows? Iningi lemali lokuthi nenza ama flag. Last time 22 million rand, the former minister wathuzenza ama flag. I question that ukuthi maybe mali yethu iyodliwa nje ngathi yini. Sithi thina njengeqembu le Democratic Alliance sifuna ukuthi ireport ibuye futhi bazosipha ama details. Ubani ozenza lokhu ngemali. Imali 71 million rand ngeke sithathe. Abantu bahlupheke. Kune load shedding. Imisebenzi ayikho. Kodwa ngifuna nje ukuthatha le mali nifake kule project esingana ama details we project siyayikhaba sithi woza 2024 woza siphezulu kwenu.
Honorable Mhlongo, the only thing I don't agree with you is that the member did not introduce the report. She did. And she asked us to adopt. Thank you. The AEFF.
Look who's talking. Chairperson, it was in 2003 when the General Conference of the United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization ratified the Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage. The convention defined intangible cultural heritage as practices, representations, expressions, knowledge, skills, as well as the instruments, objects, artifacts, and cultural spaces associated therewith. That communities, groups, and in some cases, individuals recognized as part of their cultural heritage. The intangible cultural heritage transmitted from generation to generation, is constantly created by communities and groups in response to their environment, their interaction with nature, and their history, and provides them with a sense of identity and continuity, thus promoting respect for cultural diversity and humanity. From this definition, it should be clear why settler colonial entities such as Democratic Alliance would oppose the ratification of this convention by South Africa. A neo-settler colony still dominated by a minority that has managed to ensure the discursive dominance. Chairperson, colonialism and neo-colonialism represented by the right-wingers we share with Parliament with today has always attempted to erase Africa's heritage in order for their way of doing things to be the only way. They have bastardized African customs, desecrated on our names, mocked our language, annexed our land, and forced us into wage labor so that each and every aspect of African life would be dependent on them. The struggle for national liberation was not merely for a native elite to sit on the table of the oppressor and proclaim freedom. The struggle was for reclamation of our African personality in its entirety, for the destruction of all the sick and inhumane tendencies brought by the settler communities. It was in essence a struggle for the reclamation of African culture and heritage, about the recentering of African lived experiences. This had to entail the reclamation of all that was lost during colonialism, and primarily the reclamation of land which represent identity and our being. It is for this reason we still say expropriation of land without compensation. Malibuye izwe. That is the essence of our intangible cultural heritage, and its true form. It would remain offensive to the settler minority still in charge of this country We are in support of the report. Malbuye.
You have 3 more minutes to speak about the GA.
Honorable Litsie, you don't do that. You don't unmute and start talking, please. You have to be in the house to heckle, not on the virtual platform. The IFP.
Mhlambe umuntu akaqale athokoze kulendlu ukuthi ubaba wethu nomsunguli we-IFP uya recognizewa yibo bonke abantu. Sifisa nje ukuzwakalisa angiyena usikhulumi we-IFP kodwa ngiyafisa ukuzwakalisa ukuthi sithokoza kakhulu ukuthi ubaba la kulendlu uyahlonishwa futhi uyakhunjulwa nangamagalelo akhe. Ngiyathokoza. Honorable Chair, it is embracing that the government is still in the discussion and adoption stages of matter even now, more than 20 years since its initial adoption of UNESCO. Honorable members, you will agree with me that culture is quite a fundamental aspect of the IFP. In fact, the protection, promotion, and preservation of our rich cultures lies heavily as one of our cornerstones, both as party and a nation. And this convention will help South Africa achieve that very goal. Another such benefit that comes in greatly as we progress towards globalization is that this convention will assist us in sharing our experts and best practice with other African countries, not just in the SADC region, but throughout the continent as a whole. You will appreciate that this is very crucial because we share more culture and heritage similarities than we do differences. This convention will assist us with telling our own folklore, dancing and such other intangible. The ratification and ratification and subsequent adoption of this convention should not be seen as a threat to any culture and the expense of another. In fact, its proper to implementation in the country will foster to spirit of friendship and deep understanding of one another and encourage common sense. As we look forward as African people, we need not to make mistake of forgetting our identity or where we come from. I thank you.
Honorable Kaula, i-warning leyo. Njengoba ngitshilo kumhlonishwa Litsie, nakuwe ngiyatsho. Wayithinta futhi bayakukhipha. Asiqhubekeni. FF Plus.
Dankie agbare huisvoorsitter. Huisvoorsitter, die lid van die ANC wat die verslag soort van ingelei het, bewys die probleem. En die probleem met hierdie verslag is dat daar geen wigte en teenwigte is wat die Suid-Afrikaanse burger en die belastingbetaler beskerm. Hier is weer eens 'n ondeurdagte besluit wat hier deurgevoer word. Want jy sien, voorsitter, die probleem en die kern van ontasbare kulturele bates is op die einde van die dag die feit dat die ANC-regering gefaal het om byvoorbeeld taalregte in Suid-Afrika te beskerm. Die agbare lid van die EFF blameer die verlede, maar in die afgelope 30 jaar het die ANC-regering niks gedoen om inheemse tale in Suid-Afrika tot 'n verhewe status te verhef nie. U val die mense van Suid-Afrika deur om nog steeds vir 'n skoolkind slegs die keuse tussen Afrikaans en Engels te gee. U is niks beter nie en u kan nie die verlede blameer nie. Dit is die probleem. En dan kom u hier met 'n verslag waar daar weer eens met wat tipies van hierdie departement is, waar daar 'n blanko cheque gegee word, waar ons uitgebuit gaan word, waar daar korrupsie en bedrog gaan plaasvind, en dit is waarom ons hierdie verslag nie kan ondersteun nie. Ek dank u.
Dankie. ACDP.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, the ACDP is concerned about the brevity of this report. We went through it and there is basically just one paragraph. It doesn't set out any detail about these treaties. And of course, we share the concerns about the 71 million rand that is to be spent over 3 years. Chairperson, we need more details about this expenditure, particularly given the very pressing issues that are facing the nation, as well as the fact that we are under severely constrained financial conditions. Chairperson, for that reason, the ACDP will not support this report. I thank you.
Thank you. UDM. ATM. Good. NFP.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Chairperson. The National Freedom Party will support the report. However, we want to raise a few concerns. Yes, it is important that when we're spending money in about 70 million rand, of course, we get value for money. And my experience tells me that in some of these structures like SADC and things that we are part and parcel of, we really don't get value for money. But I think it's important that as a country, we support and ratify this convention. But more importantly, I think we need to ensure that the committee itself conducts oversight to ensure the implementation, perhaps. And if we can do that, then indeed, I think it will be fruitful. I think it will be beneficial. And thank you very much. The NFP supports it.
Thank you. AIC. Cope. PAC.
Honorable Chair, PAC supports the report.
Thank you. Al-Jama.
Honorable House Chair Al-Jama supports the report. Anything to promote a United States of Africa. So we support this report wholeheartedly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The ANC.
Chairperson.
Oh, is that a point of order?
No, I just raised on that I have forgotten to support the report. The IFP support the report.
Thank you. Thank you, ma. The ANC.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair, the Chief Whip and the members on the House. The ANC has never shy away from the elections, but we are ready for elections. But today we are here, we are talking about UNESCO. The Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage by the United Nations Educational and Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, must be wholeheartedly supported as it encompasses measures that obligate state parties to identify, define, and devise appropriate measures for the preservation and promotion of intangible cultural heritage. This convention provides invaluable guidance and assistance to state parties in ensuring the effective preservation of intangible cultural heritage. The convention encouragement of countries to adopt legal, technical, and administrative and financial measures to safeguard and promote intangible cultural heritage instills confidence that higher education institutions, ecological services, and sociological will play a critical role in assisting society with the preservation of intangible cultural heritage. This is particularly important in addressing the impact of colonialism and apartheid, of legalities and safeguarding in our country and parts of Africa. As a country, we have adopted the Indigenous Knowledge Systems Act, which the Department of Science and Innovation is responsible for. The ICASA Act is another piece of legislation which will enhance the objectives of the convention. As the people, where valuable knowledge and intellectual properties which has been expropriated by colonial governments. Our pride as the people lies in that which we have invented and innovated. Through storytelling, songs, and other cultural practices, we transfer knowledge from one generation to another. What we should achieve as a society is the mainstreaming of this knowledge, as it has potential to enhance our living conditions and pride as a people. Our people has a tremendous opportunity to leverage digital technology and platforms to promote intangible cultural heritage, thanks to the convention. This presents a great chance for South Africa to lead in the innovation and preserving and safeguarding our heritage. UNESCO also highlights the urgent need for the safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage as it faces the threats of deterioration, disappearance, and extinction. By actively promoting the preservation of ICH at a family and community level, our country can create numerous new sites of memory. Even amidst the current state of affairs, many sites are being developed, further enriching our history. The UNESCO Convention emphasizes the importance of collaboration and cooperation, fostering bonds and networks that contribute to social capital, social cohesion, and nation building. This allows for strategic and effective management of our country's living heritage, promoting social cohesion and nation building. As the African National Congress, we recognize that the globalization poses unique challenges to intangible cultural heritage. One of the greatest challenges is migration or exile between the developing countries in Africa, which has resulted in untold suffering and loss of generational history. The convention by UNESCO provides a valuable opportunity to address this challenge and unravage the history of families across various countries. Engaging extensively and intensively with the data and information from these countries is crucial, finding a formula that resolves specific country requirements. Ratifying the convention will grant South Africa advantages such as access to international expertise and best practices in the field of cultural heritage. It will also strengthen regional cooperation, integration on cultural matters. We commend the department for its commitment to using this convention to intensify regional and continental international integration of arts, culture, and heritage. This assurance is not only encouraging to the committee, but also to the people as we build deliberate relations and forge stronger bonds with other countries of Africa. We firmly believe that this convention will assist our country will enable us to unravel our history, address the oppression of various cultural and tribal legacies by colonial governments, and safeguard, preserve, and promote our intangible cultural heritage. This is a goal that we will forever strive and to achieve as a country. As a diverse nation, our country's identity lies in our differences, and we should be able to harness the history and practices of cultural communities. We preserve our languages and traditional practices to respond to the current challenges confronting the nation and the world. Technology has created new avenues which will enhance our ability to preserve our intangible cultural heritage. The ANC supports this report, ratifying the convention as part of our international obligations. We are confident that we shall use the ambits of the convention to enhance our interventions and support the intangible cultural heritage. This is what we are talking about, not elections, not accountability. As the ANC is always accountable to the House every step of the way, and we are not afraid to face the elections. We are ready. Because we are always humble ourselves to the voters of South Africa. Even 2024 elections, the ANC is ready, and we'll humble ourselves and tell the voters of South Africa to support the ANC, to support the report.
Thank you. Kolobe ya tlaji.
Hola.
Mute before go diega mathata.
Hola.
Mute Kolobe before go diega mathata. Are there any objections, honorable members, to the approval of Honorable Lutred? I see your hand.
No, Chair, it was just on your question whether there are any objections.
Oh, I was still reading it. Okay. Are there any objections to the approval of the 2003 UNESCO Convention for the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage, that is ICH, as it appears on the order paper? Honorable Lutred?
Chair, please note the objection of the DA.
Noted.
Chairperson, the objection of the FF Plus as well.
Okay, noted.
Please note the objection of the ACDP. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. With those objections, this approval is agreed to. Thank you. We now proceed to the second motion on the order paper. Honorable members, the next item on the order paper is a decision of question on the draft resolution in the name of Dr. P.J. Groenewald. I wish to remind you that this draft resolution was debated in a virtual mini plenary on Thursday, the 14th September, but that a decision thereon can only be taken in the full plenary. This is also the case for the other decision of question, which are orders 5 to 6. I now put the motion. Are there any objections to the order?
Chairperson, we call for a division.
Okay. With the division being called, the bells will be rung for 5 minutes.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Thank you. Order, honorable members. The speaker has determined that in accordance with the rules, a manual voting procedure will be used for this division. Firstly, in order to establish a quorum, I would request the table to confirm that we have the requisite number of members physically present. Okay. And even on the virtual platform. Party whips will then be given an opportunity to confirm the number of their members present and indicate if they vote for or against the question. A member who wishes to abstain or vote against the party vote may do so by informing the chairperson. Now, having confirmed that we have the requisite quorum, we will now proceed. The question before the House, honorable members, is that the draft resolution in the name of Dr. P.J. Groenewald be agreed to. The voting will now commence. The doors of the chamber are closed and locked, and even those on the virtual platform should not be allowed to come in. Are the party whips ready? Yes.
Chairperson, I have not received anything from the table in terms of virtual figures.
Okay. That's not how it's done.
I know, but we have not yet received it. So I want to say that I have not yet received it.
Okay. Members on the virtual platform, please. And I hope nobody's coming in. You will be assisted by the table staff. But as usual, the whips must check on their own before. Honorable Mvana, sewuvela kanengi. Ake umise ngenrwakho leyo. Mam Kappa or Ubab Kappa. Bab Kappa, please now evala. Solange ukhona lapho awuzokhuluma ni. Thula nje. Chief Whip of the ANC.
Masibulele kuwe hlali ngaphambili. ANC apha ngaphakathi singamashumi amabini. Phaya kwiqonga eliphezulu likhulu amashumi amahlanu angenanto isinike lonto apha ngaphakathi amashumi amabili. Phaya kwiqonga eliphezulu likhulu amashumi mathathu anesibini. Itsho loo nto isinike ikhulu amashumi amahlanu anesibini, 152, who are voting against.
Thank you. The DA? Thank you, Chairperson.
Were you assisted?
Yes, I have. Oh, thank you. In the House, we are 17. On the virtual platform, 47. That is 64 supporting the motion. Okay. The EFF?
EFF, okay, we have 3 in the House. On the virtual platform, how many do we have, Mikey? And then after they gave me the numbers, you shall just have to say them out loud. 14 plus 3. Can you just give it from your side, Dr. Tembekwayo? It's 14 plus on the platform.
Okay, thank you, Chair. 14 on the platform, 3 inside, which is a total of 17 voting against. Thank you.
Thank you. The IFP?
Chairperson,
Yes, Babutengwa.
1 in the House, 6 on the platform in support.
Okay. The FF plus?
Thank you, House Chairperson. We are 2 in the House, 6 on the platform. That's 8 in support.
Okay. The ACDP?
Thank you, House Chair. The ACDP is 4 on the platform, voting in support of the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. UDM? None. ATM? None. Good. NFP?
Chair, 1 on virtual in support. Thank you.
Okay. The AIC? COPE? PAC?
Aye, Chair, PAC vote against.
Thank you. Aljama?
1 in the House, we vote against.
Thank you. Is there
House
any
Chair,
member who?
House Chair, my apologies. ACDP, I understand from IT, we're only 3 on the platform, but my advice is we are 4 on the platform. So can we just check that? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your honesty.
Maruti.
There are 3, yes. Okay, so you have to minus 1 there. Okay, are there any members who wish to vote against differently from their party? None. The voting session is now closed. Chief Whip, they say they want to double check with you. Can you say your numbers again? This time is Kulumis Lungu.
Never. 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 Sukua. Hi. Kitse ka hare ka mona ke mashome a mabedi.
20 inside.
Ka re hodimo mane. Ke lekgolo. Mashome a mararo a metso e mebedi. Ha e kopana ke lekgolo le mashome le mashome a mahlano a nang le bobedi, 152. Ba batlang.
Never, Chief Whip, never, our never.
Okay. The outcomes are as follows. Abstain 0. Abavumelana nayo. Abathi we agree with it. It's 83. And then abangavumelani nayo 171, which means the request falls down. Thank you. So there's no draft resolution, you must understand it. Okay, thank you. I know this one's confuse us sometimes. We are now on order number 5. The fifth order. Okay. The secretary, please read.
Decision of question on the report of Portfolio Committee on Small Business Development on oversight visit to Northwest Province from 27 to 31 March 2023.
Honorable members, let's remember that from this order until the 16th order, all these orders is just a matter of the question because they were debated. Okay. Are there any objections to the adoption of that report? No objections, agreed to. The 6th order.
Decision of question on report of Portfolio Committee on Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development and Portfolio Committee on Employment and Labor on joint oversight on living and working conditions in farming communities.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the adoption of the report? Mr. Chairperson, please note the objection of the FF+. Noted. No further objections. With that objection, the report is agreed to. The 7th order. The Secretary will read the 7th order.
Decision of question on report of Standing Committee on Appropriations on oversight visit to Department of Defense and institutions in Gauteng Province from 19 to 22 April 2022.
Are there any objections to the adoption of the report? No objections. Agreed to. The Secretary will read the 8th order.
Decision of question on report of Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies on oversight visit to Gauteng and Free State from 29 to 31 March 2023.
Are there any objections to the adoption of the report? No objections. Agreed to. The Secretary will read the 9th order.
Decision of question on request for approval by Parliament of treaty for the establishment of the African Medicines Agency in terms of Section 231, Sub 2 of Constitution 1996.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the approval of the treaty?
Please note the objection of the
Oh.
DA.
Thank you very much.
And the objection of the FF+.
Noted.
Please note the objection of the ACDP. Thank you, Chair.
Noted. With those objections, the report's agreed to. The 10th order. The Secretary will read the 10th order.
Decision of question on request for approval by Parliament of African Charter on the values and principles of decentralization,
local governance and local development in terms of section 231, sub 2 of Constitution 1996.
Are there any objections to the approval of the African Charter on the values and principles of decentralization, local governance, and local development as it appears on the order paper? No objections. Agreed to. The 11th order. The Secretary will read the 11th order.
Decision of question on report of Portfolio Committee on Sport, Arts and Culture on a petition from artists and members of the public calling on the Assembly to investigate the commissioning by the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture of the Mzansi National Philharmonic Orchestra at an estimated cost of 54 million rand, submitted by Mr. T.W. Mhlongo, MP.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the adoption of the report?
Please note the objection of the DA.
Noted.
And the objection of the FF plus.
Noted, honorable members. With those objections, it's agreed to.
Chair, you can also note the objection of the EFF.
Noted, thank you. The Secretary will read the 12th order.
Decision of question on report of Portfolio Committee on Human Settlements on oversight visit to Northern Cape and Northwest provinces.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the adoption of the report? No objections. Agreed to. The Secretary will read the 13th order.
Decision of question on report of Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services on oversight visits to Eastern Cape, Limpopo, and Free State provinces.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the adoption of the report? No objections. Agreed to. The Secretary will read the 14th order.
Decision of question on report of Portfolio Committee on Defence and Military Veterans on oversight visit to selected military bases and DMV housing sites in Bloemfontein area from 23 to 25 November 2022.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the adoption of the report? No objections. Agreed to. The Secretary will read the 15th order.
Decision of question on report of Portfolio Committee on Police on oversight visit to Northern Cape and Gauteng provinces on 21 and 22 May 2023.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the adoption of the report?
The EFF object to this report.
Noted. Thank you. The Secretary will read the 16th order.
Decision of question on report of Portfolio Committee on Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities on a petition from the Post Office to Parliament, Task Team and the Uyinene Mretwana Foundation calling on the Assembly to establish the National Council on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, submitted by Ms. N.K. Sharif.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the adoption of the report? No objections. Agreed to. Order. I request members to stand and wait for the chair and the maids to leave the chamber. That concludes the business for the day and the House is adjourned.